Let us look into question number 71. How does Microsoft Defender for Cloud support regulatory compliance? Here, the interviewer is trying to understand, do you know about the Microsoft Defender for Cloud and how it can help with the compliance purposes? Let's populate the short answer. Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides a robust support for regulatory compliance through various features. So let's look at what are these features. These features are continuous assessment, policy driven, built in templates, compliance dashboards, things like that. So let's go through this one by one. First is continuous assessment. How does that help with the regulatory compliances? You can help them understand by telling, hey, with continuous assessment, you can regularly monitor your Azure resources to ensure they comply with relevant regulatory requirements. Second is policy driven options. See, these policy driven enforcement allows you to utilize Azure policy to automatically enforce compliance with standards and configurations. Third is built in templates. Microsoft has these built in or predefined templates which you can use it for standards such as ISO 27001, PCI DSS, NIST, and SOCTSP, which will make it easier to map resources to these frameworks. And additionally, you can take help of this compliance dashboard as well. This will provide a visual representation of your compliance status, allowing you to easily track and manage compliance effort. And it also supports exporting reports for auditing preparation. Let's look into question number 72. Here the question is, what is the role of managed identity in Azure and how do they enhance security? So here the interviewer is trying to understand, do you know about what is managed identity in Azure? So let's populate the short answer. The managed identity are a feature of Azure Active Directory, that is now Entra ID, which provides Azure services with an automatically managed identity in AAD. This identity can be used to authenticate any service that provide Azure AD authentication by eliminating the need to manage credentials manually. When you talk about the managed identity, there are two types. These are system assigned and user assigned. So let's look at these one by one. So what is system assigned? System assigned is a type of identity that is tied to the life cycle of an Azure resource, such as Azure Virtual Machine, Azure App Service, or Azure Functions app. When the resource is deleted, the identity is also deleted. The next type is the user assigned. This is a standalone identity that can be created independently and assigned to multiple Azure resources. This persists even if the resource which it is assigned are deleted. So what are some of the benefits of managed identity? Let's look at some of the benefits. Let's go through this one by one. The first one is the managed identity allows you to do credential management. This eliminates the need to store credentials in your code or configuration file, reducing the risk of any sort of credential exposure. Second, it provides you with integration with other Azure services, where managed identities can seamlessly integrate with other Azure services like Azure Key Vault, Azure Storage, and Azure SQL Database, enabling you for secure access. Third is enhanced security. Managed identity allows you to use token-based authentication, which improves security by avoiding hard-coded credentials and reducing the surface attacks. Another benefit is managed identity is easy to use. It simplifies the authentication process for developers, allowing them to focus on writing the code without worrying about the credential management. Let's look at question number 73. This is a scenario-based question. Question is, your organization need to store API keys securely and retrieve them at the runtime of an Azure function. Which Azure service should you use and why? I introduced about this particular service which I'm going to talk about right now earlier in some other questions as well. The correct answer here is you should be suggesting an Azure Key Vault as a solution. If you look at why, these are some of the points which I want to highlight here. First, Azure Key Vault can be used to securely store the customer's API keys, connection strings, and other secrets. Second, Azure Function can directly integrate with the Key Vault. Third, additionally, it provides audit logs for any sort of secret access and lifecycle management. And then additionally, you should be explaining about why Key Vault, what are the benefits, things like that. We already talked about it. On a quick high level, Azure Key Vault ensure that the secrets are kept secure by providing fine-grained access control and encryption. The secrets and the keys are stored securely. Customers can reduce the need for developers to manage credentials manually. And Azure Key Vault provides automated key rotation and lifecycle management. So give them these sort of additional benefits as well. Let's look at question number 74. How does Microsoft Defender for Cloud integrate with Azure policy for security governance? Let's populate the short answer. So first and foremost, Microsoft Defender for Cloud uses Azure Security or Azure policy to enforce and remediate any sort of security configuration across Azure subscription. This integration helps organizations maintain compliance and secure their cloud resources effectively. Now, what are these integration points? First is ability to do policy assignments. Customers can define and enforce compliance standard across various resources within your Azure environment using these policy assignments. The next is recommendations. Defender for Cloud Apps maps security findings to Azure policy definition, providing actionable recommendations for any sort of improvement you need. Third is remediation. This supports auto remediation of security misconfiguration, ensuring continuous protection without any sort of manual intervention. So you can throw in other examples as well. You can tell that, hey, Azure policy will allow you to integrate with Azure Security Center that leverages the Defender for Cloud integration with Azure Security Center to enhance threat detection and response capabilities. Additionally, you can generate comprehensive reports on compliance status, highlighting areas of non-compliance and providing insights for remediation. Let's look at question number 75. This is a multiple choice question. Which of the following is not a feature of Azure Key Vault? We are going to do a deduction. Let's go through this one by one. We already look into Azure Key Vault, so by now we should be knowing which one is the correct answer. First, can Azure Key Vault do secret management? 100% yes. That is the main purpose of Azure Key Vault. Second, can it host website hosting? No. That is Azure App Service is what you can use for any sort of website hosting. Next, can Azure Key Vault do key management? Yes. Can Azure Key Vault do certificate management? 100% yes. So if you look at the question number 73, we kind of explained about the features of Azure Key Vault. So you can read about more here in this reference link as well. So the correct answer for this question is public website hosting, which is wrong. Azure Key Vault cannot do public website hosting. In this last segment, we are going to go through multiple components of Azure. We're going to go through Azure pricing, TCO calculator, different ways you can do cost management and budgeting. We're going to go through questions on Azure Monitor. We're going to go through questions on service level agreement, things like that. In total, we have 25 questions within this segment. Let's look at the first question here. That is question number 76. What is Azure Cost Management and Billing, and how does it help organization? So first, help the interviewer understand what is Azure Cost Management. You can tell this by explaining Azure Cost Management and Billing is a comprehensive suite of tools provided by Microsoft designed to help organizations monitor, allocate, and optimize their cloud spending both in Azure and across other connected cloud environments. And then how does this help the organizations? Let's help you understand these one by one. First key benefit is visibility into cloud spending. Azure Cost Management and the Billing provides you detailed insight into where the costs are being incurred, enabling your organization to understand their spending patterns much better. The next is inbuilt budgets and alerting mechanisms. This allows you to set up spending limits, and you will receive notification when certain thresholds are approached or exceeded. And this helps in preventing unexpected cost overruns as well. The third is the cost allocation. Azure Cost Management facilitate grouping of resources by tags or management group for any sort of chargeback purposes. This enables better financial management and accountability when various departments and projects work together for different Azure resources. They can work together or they can work independently as well. But you can do chargebacks based on which department is using that specific resources. The next is the built-in recommendations. So these cloud optimization recommendations provide you suggestions for how you can save cost and show you different opportunities, such as it will showcase you by purchasing the reserved instances or right sizing the resources, how much money you can save on these. On top of it, you will get reporting and analytics capability to track spending trends. You can forecast future cost and generate detailed report for any sort of stakeholder. Let's look at question number 77. How can you set up budgets and alerts in Azure Cost Management? First, what is this budget? So you need to understand budget first before explaining how can you set up. So first, let them know that budget in Azure Cost Management allow customers to plan and track spending over specific period, and alerts notify the administrator when spending approaches exceed defined threshold. So how do you set this up? You can basically go to the cost management. There is a plus option for billing, and where you can click on budgets and it will allow you to add different budgets. You can either set up budget for different threshold, and these threshold could be 50% or 75% or 100%. And then you can specify the recipient for these budget alerts. So they will get notification based on whenever it nears a particular threshold. Let us look at some of the key benefits of this budgeting. First, it will allow you to detect these overspending early, because these alerts enable timely intervention before the cost spiral out of control. Second, it allows you to take informed decision, because these budgeting or these alerts provide actionable insight for better cost management and control. Third, you can align this spending with your organizational target, because you can keep track of it. This ensures that the spending aligns with your financial target and your organizational objectives. Additionally, this budgeting offers clear visibility into your spending patterns, promoting any sort of transparency and accountability. By setting these limits, organization can proactively manage their spending. Let's look at question 78. What is Azure Pricing Calculator and how can it assist in cost estimation? So first, let's populate the short answer. The Azure Pricing Calculator is a free web-based tool designed to help users eliminate the cost of Azure services before deployment. By providing a detailed and customizable interface, this allows for accurate cost planning and budgeting to ensure financial efficiency. Let's look at some of the key features of Azure Pricing Calculator. First, the pricing calculator allows you users to choose from a wide variety of Azure services such as virtual machine, database, networking, and other for looking at the cost. Second, the configuration detail. So you can configure specific detail for each of these services, including you can pick a region, how does that affect the cost, or you can pick up different tier. When we studied storage, we studied about different tiers like hot, cool, and archive. So you will be able to pick and choose region, tier, and you can expect different type of cost estimate based on whichever option you choose. Third is the pricing model comparison. You can compare the cost between pay-as-you-go and reserved pricing models to determine the most cost-effective option. And finally, you can export and share these reports. This allows you to export the cost estimate for sharing with the team members, or you can keep it for record keeping purposes. Additional benefits include you can use this to help forecast your project cost accurately, or you can use it to promote transparency in cost estimation and allocation, making it easier to justify the expenses in your organization before using these Azure services. Let's look into question number 79. How does Azure Advisor provide cost optimization recommendation? So first let's understand what is Azure Advisor. So let's go through what. So you might feel like why I'm reading through this. I just basically want to provide you a crisp definition so that you can actually read about it, and then you can keep that in your mind and articulate in your own words. So Azure Advisor analyzes your deployed services and provides actionable recommendation to help optimize resources and reduce any sort of unnecessary cost. It also leverages a comprehensive set of metrics and best practices to ensure that your Azure environment is cost efficient and performance optimized. Let us look into some of the key recommendations which you can talk about in your interview. One of the recommendation is the right size or shutdown of underutilized virtual machine. Azure Advisor identifies virtual machines that are underutilized and recommends resizing them to a more appropriate size or shutting them down to save cost. Second recommendation is reserved instances. This will give you recommendation for workload for consistent. First and foremost, it looks for any sort of consistent user patterns, and if can identify that, Azure Advisor suggests purchasing reserved instances to take advantage of significant cost savings for these resources. The next recommendation is delete idle resources. It could be either network gateways or unused disk. Azure Advisor will flag idle network gateways and unused disk, advising their removal to avoid unnecessary expenses. Another type of recommendation you get is you will get alerts from Azure Advisor recommending you utilizing existing on-premises licenses for your Windows Server and SQL Server in the Azure environment to minimize the cost. This is known as hybrid benefit for your servers and SQL Server. Let's look at question number 80. What is total cost ownership or TCO calculator, and how does it help organizations planning cloud migrations? Let's populate the short answer to help you understand what is TCO. The TCO or total cost ownership calculator helps businesses estimate the potential cost saving of migrating on-premises workload to Azure. So if you have not gone through this TCO calculator or Azure pricing calculator, please click on these links, the reference link, to go and navigate through that. It's fairly easy to understand, straightforward, and you can get a hang of it pretty quickly. So let's look at what are the key capabilities of TCO calculator. First, it allows you to compare the on-premises cost. These comparison could be from a hardware point of view, software point of view, or electricity or maintenance cost with Azure. Second, this has an ability for you to input custom data. These custom data could be your on-premises server specifications, your existing licenses purchased, or the current labor cost, what it is incurring you at the moment for any sort of accurate calculations. Third, it helps you generate detailed report, and you can export these results for further analytics.